Imagine a secret hidden inside a woman's body. A secret that, once revealed, would launch 1 million medical breakthroughs, save countless lives, and generate billions of dollars for corporations across the globe. This is the story of Henrietta Lacks, a poor, black tobacco farmer and mother of 5 from rural Virginia. A woman who died in 1951, but whose own cells did not. She is known today by 4 letters, HeLa, and while her name is synonymous with the most important biological resource in medical history, the details of her life and the profound injustice done to her are a testament to the shadows and triumphs of modern science. This is the tale of an unwitting gift to humanity, a family kept in the dark, and the fight for medical consent that continues to this day. Henrietta Lacks was born Loretta Pleasant in 1920, later going by Henrietta. She grew up in Clover, Virginia, where her ancestors had been enslaved. She was a woman known for her style, her energy, and her deep devotion to her family. In 1941, she married her cousin David Day Lacks, and they eventually moved to Turner Station, Maryland, a bustling, working-class community near Baltimore. They had 5 children. Life was hard, but filled with love and the rhythm of their tight-knit community. Then, in early 1951, shortly after giving birth to her youngest son, Henrietta felt a knot inside her. She was bleeding abnormally. She went to Johns Hopkins Hospital, one of the few hospitals in the area that would treat black patients at the time, and was directed to the segregated ward. The diagnosis was immediate and devastating, an aggressive form of cervical cancer. As part of her treatment, the standard, painful radium therapy of the day, a surgeon, Dr. Lawrence Wharton Jr., collected 2 small samples of tissue from her cervix, one from the malignant tumor and one from healthy tissue nearby. Crucially, Henrietta Lacks was never asked for permission to take these samples for research. She never gave consent. It was an accepted practice in medicine at the time, to take and study a patient's tissue without their knowledge. Those tissue samples were immediately rushed down the hall to the lab of Dr. George Otto Gay, a prominent cancer researcher at Johns Hopkins. For decades, Gay had been desperately trying to create a cell line, cells that could survive and reproduce indefinitely outside the human body. Before Henrietta, every single human cell sample Gay had ever cultured had died within days. Researchers couldn't test drugs, vaccines, or the effects of toxins, because their samples wouldn't live long enough. But Henrietta's cells were different. Gay's lab assistant, Mary Kubitschek, was astonished. Unlike every other sample, Henrietta's cancerous cells didn't just survive, they thrived. They doubled their population every 20 to 24 hours. They were immortal. Dr. Gay named them, as was his custom, using the first 2 letters of the patient's first and last name, HeLa. While her cells began their eternal journey in the lab, Henrietta Lacks' own battle was ending. The aggressive cancer spread rapidly throughout her body. She died on October 4, 1951, at the age of 31, and was buried in an unmarked grave in the family cemetery in Virginia. The woman was gone. The cells lived on. HeLa cells became the first cost-effective, easily reproducible human cell line. The demand was immediate and astronomical. This was the miracle material the scientific world had been waiting for. Suddenly, researchers could perform the same experiments on the same human cells in labs all over the world, ensuring consistency and accelerating discovery exponentially. In 1952, HeLa cells were essential for Jonas Salk's polio vaccine research, mass-produced in the first-ever cell production factory. They were used to study the effects of radiation and poisons. They were the first human cells ever sent into space to determine the effect of zero gravity on human tissue. They helped map the human genome. They contributed to breakthroughs in cloning, gene mapping, in vitro fertilization, and HIV/AIDS research. Ironically, given her fate, they were crucial in developing the HPV vaccine, which prevents cervical cancer. To date, over 110,000 scientific publications have cited the use of HeLa cells. They have contributed to at least 3 Nobel Prizes. They were, and continue to be, bought, sold, and shipped around the globe by the tons, becoming a multi-billion-dollar industry. But for the first 2 decades of this global medical revolution, the name Henrietta Lacks, the woman behind the immortal cells, was virtually unknown outside of the scientific community. While billions of her cells were traveling the globe, Henrietta's husband, Day, and her 5 children were struggling. They were poor, often without health insurance, and still mourning the woman they lost. They had no idea that their mother's cells were not only alive but were one of the most vital tools in all of medical history. The truth finally started to leak out in the early 1970s. Because HeLa cells were so hardy, they began to contaminate other cell cultures in labs worldwide. Scientists needed to determine which cells were Henrietta's. This led researchers to contact the Lacks family, not to apologize or to inform them about their mother's world-changing contribution, but to request blood samples to study their genetics and find a marker for the HeLa cells. Imagine, a scientist calls a woman who hasn't even learned the true cause of her mother's death and asks for her blood, vaguely mentioning that her mother is famous and immortal. The family was terrified. They were uneducated about science, and they came from a generation that had endured the horrific Tuskegee syphilis study, a government-funded experiment that deliberately left black men untreated for the disease. They were suspicious and scared that they, too, would be experimented on. When they finally understood the truth, that their mother's cells were being sold and used globally, they received no compensation. They had never consented. They saw no benefits. The story of Henrietta Lacks is not just a scientific narrative. It is a story of bioethics, race, and consent. Her case revealed a monumental flaw in the medical system. At the time, once a tissue sample was removed from a body, it was considered discarded, and the patient had no legal right to it or to the profits derived from it. It wasn't until journalist Rebecca Skloot's best-selling book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, was published in 2010 that the full scope of this injustice reached the public consciousness. The public outcry finally forced change. While there are still no laws requiring compensation for the original source of cell lines, the story of Henrietta Lacks fundamentally changed the conversation. Her case is cited globally in discussions about informed consent, the ethical and legal requirement that patients understand and agree to medical procedures, and the use of their tissues. In 2013, the National Institutes of Health (NIH) reached a landmark agreement with the Lacks family, giving them control over who can access the full genomic data of the HeLa cells. And in 2023, the family reached a confidential settlement with a major biotech company that profited from the cell line, a measure of long overdue accountability. Henrietta Lacks passed away too young, a victim of an aggressive disease. But through her immortal cells, she has become an unsung heroine of modern medicine. Her legacy is a dual one, a gift to science that saved millions, and a scar on medical history that demanded we confront our ethics and finally recognize the inherent dignity and rights of every single patient. She is Henrietta Lacks, and she is truly immortal.